Well, hi everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the MACS podcast. My name is Steve Schaeber, and I'm the Manager of Service Training for MACS, the Mobile Air Climate Systems Association. And today I'm in Bangkok, Thailand, with Kristen Taddonio from the IGSD, the Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development, and also with Tilden Chao from Yale's Carbon Containment Lab. So we're here to attend the OEWG event, which is taking place at the UN building here in Bangkok, but we have a whole lot more going on than that. So Kristen, if you'd like to start off, can you give us a little bit of background on OEWG and what takes place here?
Yeah, the OEWG, or the Open-Ended Working Group, is one of three important meetings held annually to implement the Montreal Protocol. That's the treaty that protected the ozone layer, successfully, I might add, and now is the global treaty whereby countries are agreeing to phase down the production and consumption of hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs. So we'll be joined by delegates from all over the world for 1 week of meetings at the UN building here in Bangkok to discuss mostly the implementation of that treaty and the financing for developing countries to assist them with their HFC phase down.
So Kristen and I just arrived here 2 days ago, but Tilden, your journey began a few weeks ago. And I understand that you've been out visiting many shops, not just here in Thailand.
Yeah, that's right, Steve. So I've been in Southeast Asia for about a month now, and I've had the chance to go to over 100 shops repairing mobile air climate systems around Thailand and Malaysia and Indonesia and Singapore. And I've learned a whole lot along the way. It's been really cool. Yeah, so I've had the chance to go to over 100 shops that repair air conditioning systems in cars in Singapore first, and I went to this district that was actually full of these shops repairing ACs, and you could walk up, and initially the car mechanics were kind of reluctant to talk to me, but I sat in their office and they said, okay, we'll just wait here for a second, and then I waited for 30 minutes, an hour, and then finally they were ready to talk to me, and they showed me their recovery machines, and then they also talked to me about how they were servicing cars that contained HFO1234YF, which of course is pretty abundant now in the United States. And they told me, yeah, well, we don't really have HFOs on site. They're so expensive to buy. So we put HFC 134A in, we have the different fittings and everything, but it works perfectly fine. And he asked me, well, is there any technical difference between the two chemicals? And I explained that one has the HFC has a very high global warming potential. HFOs are a little bit flammable, but that generally they operate similarly enough that a lot of people just interchange them, even though you shouldn't.
Yeah, and this was in Singapore, which is a relatively wealthier country in the region, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I think, at least as an American, whenever I think of Singapore, I think of these great laws, or maybe perhaps slightly authoritarian laws that fine people when they litter on the street or when they do anything that, or like jaywalk. So I was expecting when I went to Singapore that everyone would be recovering refrigerant, everyone would be abiding by the law as written, but indeed in the mobile sector, things didn't always pan out that way.
Yeah, that's surprising to me too. I would have expected the same thing, that they would have pretty strict laws for technicians when it comes to mobile AC service.
In Singapore, did you see any difference between, the professional branded shops and maybe some of the less formal sector, or were all of the shops kind of the same?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, one relevant thing is that we just spent the day at Denso here in Thailand, which is one of the world's largest auto part suppliers and one of the leaders in best practice for air conditioner repair. And I visited some of their shops in Singapore, and they looked really good. They had recovery machines, but right across the street there would be a shop that had, labeled itself as a mobile air conditioning repair shop, but it was clearly not as nice, probably charging lower prices for the customer, and they didn't have recovery machines. And I said, why don't you have a recovery machine? And they're like, what are you talking about? I just use a vacuum pump. So there's a really big spread in the practices just on a single street in some of these places.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool to witness.
So yeah, like you mentioned, we also visited yesterday with Denso. It's one of our longtime MACS manufacturer members. We met with their R&D and engineering and also their service teams here in Thailand. Kristen, can you share with us some of your takeaways from that meeting?
Yeah, well, one of my takeaways was that Denso is a very welcoming host. So we really appreciate Denso taking the time out of their busy day to meet with us and explain to us a little bit about the situation in Thailand. The purpose of this journey and of coming early so we could get some insights, both from Denso and Thailand, but also Tilden's journey throughout Southeast Asia, is to understand the reality about what typically happens on the ground. Internationally, countries are phasing down HFC consumption on a global warming potential basis. And although we have seen a transition in Europe, in Japan, and in the United States to HFO 1234YF, prices remain elevated, especially, and that difference can be striking, especially in developing countries. So we really wanted to see, one, are HFO vehicles starting to penetrate the market here? If so, what are the typical practices like? What are the economic incentives to use one refrigerant or the other? The answer so far in Denso, Thailand was we don't see a lot of vehicles yet using HFOs. Indeed, that is consistent with our research prior to this particular journey, where it seemed that all vehicles are still being manufactured here in Thailand using HFC 134A. But they know the transition is coming. So we really appreciated the opportunity to see them in action, to see them using their refrigerant recovery and recycling machines. And one of my takeaways is that although Denso is using it and their supplier network is, they explained to us that there's over 1,000 shops in Thailand that are doing AC service. And because, refrigerant recovery and recycling machines can be fairly expensive, perhaps even more expensive here than we see in the US, not everyone can afford it. So that might be an opportunity for the World Bank or for negotiators to consider a donation to developing countries to help them be able to afford that kind of important equipment.
Right, because just using a recovery machine itself, in a way, solves a big part of the problem, right? Just recovering the refrigerant out of the system, whatever small amount may be left, or if the whole system charges in there, pulling it out so that you can recycle it and reuse it.
That's right, Steve.
Does a lot to help.
Reduce, reuse, recycle, and that helps keep costs down, both for the customer and the service shops. And if they transition to a more expensive refrigerant, like HFO 1234YF, that ability to recover, recycle, and reuse is going to be even more important.
Right. So after our meeting at the Denso facility, we went out to visit one of their Denso authorized service centers, or one of their authorized affiliated shops. It's called Pit and Go. There are many Denso certified shops across Thailand, which is similar to what we have back in the States. For example, shops that are affiliated with Napa Auto Parts or AC Delco, where the aftermarket supplier helps the shop with training and support, and of course with parts to the shop, and also with special warranty and discount programs. So Tilden, with your experience traveling around the region, was there anything in particular that you noticed, or could you share some of your observations compared to our trip to Pit and Go?
Yeah, it was interesting to visit Pit and Go because it was so much bigger, first of all, in footprint than a lot of the shops that I visited, which were literally kind of in the garage on the street. You have this garage where you can, in the morning, you just lift up and there's this big corrugated piece of metal that rolls up, and then there's your shop. But this Pit and Go facility was really quite amazing. It had all sorts of things, a huge cavernous warehouse area where cars were coming in. And you could probably put, several dozen cars in there and be working on them all at once. So first, the size stuck out to me, but I thought it was really interesting that that they had these recovery machines, which were themselves more sophisticated than a lot of the recovery machines that I saw in the field, which were not always triple R machines, but sometimes only recovery and recharge.
So they didn't have a recycling component.
Yeah, not always. I mean, one interesting thing is that many years ago, a few decades ago, some of these countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, actually gave technicians free machines as a way to recover CFCs and to transition to 134A. And there's, I think, more consciousness among government agencies and among regulators that giving technicians equipment to recover rather than release these gases was something important to do for the ozone and important to do for the climate. So a lot of those machines happen to be very old, and some of them were still in use when I showed up to these shops.
Yeah, I thought that was a really important observation. So, although Denso and its affiliates may have newer machines, that a lot of the older machines, was it in Malaysia that they were still using the older machines?
It was a little bit of both.
Yeah. Okay. But that, they're still appreciated and they're still in use, and that knowledge on how to use the machines is being passed from generation to generation,
Exactly.
which is not necessarily something that I think some of the negotiators who come to these meetings always appreciate. Sometimes there's skepticism that, if a machine is provided, whether or not it's actually being used. So I thought that was very good to know that people are using those machines. Could you talk to us a little bit, though? One thing that I noticed in the facilities here in Thailand, and even walking around the streets, is I haven't really seen any small cans of HFC 134A yet. Indeed, there are these kind of cute, almost 3 kilogram
They are cute.
mini
Cool
canisters. But the more common size seems to be the 30-pound container, and then they even have a very large 40 kilogram, almost 100-pound containers that they have at some of the busier MACS shops. Could you speak about the differences regionally, the type of refrigerant containers that you have found?
Yeah, for sure. It's been really interesting. I mean, in Singapore and Malaysia, I didn't see basically a single small can. And I was expecting to find a couple, but really found none. In fact, basically the only small can I found was a 1 kilogram cylinder of HFO 1234YF that a shop just happened to have on hand, which is not really a small can, but is small enough. But when I landed in Indonesia, in Jakarta, the very first shop that I visited actually had a stack of boxes, each containing 36 small cans of Clea brand 134A. And there were probably like 8 boxes all stacked up on top of each other. So, more than maybe, doing the math here, more than 240 small cans just waiting to be used. And it's a really fascinating phenomenon because some technicians you talk to, they say, oh yeah, well, I only use gas from the larger cylinder. It makes a lot of sense for me. It's wasteful to use a small can. Also, the gas is better quality in the bigger cylinder. And then I meet some technicians who say, oh, well, the gas is better quality in the small can. And also, plus, I don't want to be lifting that thing up or having to turn it on its head when I recharge a car with gas. So, and there's one more thing, which is that technicians didn't always have recovery machines on site. They didn't even have scales. So they didn't always know how much refrigerant they were charging into the system unless they were using a small can. They said, well, we know this is 390 grams, and if we use one can, we know it's 390. But if we are using the larger cylinder, it's kind of harder for us to tell what we're putting in there. So it's really pretty interesting. And then one last thing is that some shops don't have enough business to justify buying a large cylinder. So some of them are doing AC repair kind of on the side. Some of them are not just a garage, but almost like a closet or like a little stall in a big district repairing cars generally. And I can't imagine that they have that many jobs. So they said, oh, well, it doesn't make sense for us to buy something big. We just buy a couple small cans whenever we need it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing to see that difference. I think the statistic actually is, surveyed about 100 shops, 50 in Malaysia, about 50 in Indonesia. I think maybe 60% of shops in Indonesia were using small cans, and in Malaysia is only about 4 or 5%. So a really big difference there.
Yeah.
So today we continue our quest to learn more about mobile AC servicing in Thailand, and we're going to visit some shops and some refrigerant suppliers. In fact, there's one right across the street from our hotel that we're going to stop at, which sells R134A, R22, R410A, and something called R9000. So we're going to look into that, and then more to come. But going forward, Kristen, can you share with us some last thoughts on what you'd like to see as a result of this whole project?
I would like to see some very good insights into what's working and what could be done better. So I think some of the optimistic results from Tilden's research and from what we've seen on the ground so far is that refrigerant is being sold in containers, and oftentimes that are refillable, that technicians have training available. In fact, MACS might even need to step up its game, because we heard that training for a minimum lasts 2 days here at the Denso training facility. So I think that's really positive, and also everyone that we've talked with kind of understands the need to improve servicing practices to reduce HFC emissions.
Yeah, because they're concerned about global warming here just like we are.
Yeah, in fact,
they know the issue and want to do something about it.
Indeed, and if you look at the heat wave that has recently impacted Thailand and the region, I think that was an eye-opener for people, along with the deterioration in air quality that not we're pointing out, but that others have pointed out to us as another justification for the need to reduce global warming pollution.
Yeah, I think one of our meetings yesterday, we talked about PM 2.5.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and they knew the exact reading for the day.
So it's in the minds of the people. They know about it and want to do something to make it better.
Indeed.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, that concludes this special episode of the MACS podcast. Tilden, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah,
for
pleasure to
all
be
the
here.
great work that you've done in surveying shops. I'm sure that data is going to be super valuable to the report.
Yeah. Well, it's just a pleasure to be here. And of course, Steve is actually my teacher. I got into MAC just a few weeks ago after spending much of my early work on HFCs in the stationary sector, on residential air conditioning and supermarket refrigeration. So it's really cool to be able to learn more about the mobile sector, to spend a lot of time with mechanics this summer, just listening to how they learned their work, what the challenges they're facing, and just trying to learn, listen, and absorb everything coming to me. So appreciate your work, appreciate MACS, and it's been a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a great connection for MACS and Yale to get together and work on projects like this. We're happy to have you, and glad that you came to spend time with us in Lansdowne.
Yeah, that was super fun.
And Kristen, of course, thank you so much for putting all of this together, not only for this trip, but for the entire project, and of course for your work on the report to the World Bank.
All right, anytime.
And of course, we'd like to thank all of you for joining us. If you like this episode, please give a thumbs up, and also please subscribe to get notified of future episodes. And I'd like to give a big thank you to all of our MACS members. It's because of your support that all of us on the MACS staff are able to support projects like this to help improve mobile AC service and the environment through training, education, and participation. If you're not a MACS member and you'd like to learn more about our association or to join MACS as a member, please visit our website, www.maxmobileairclimate.org. My name is Steve Schaeber.
And I'm Kristen Taddonio.
I'm Tilden Chao.
And we'll see you next time. All right, cool.
Yay!
Cool. Thanks, Steve.
Yes,
That was fun.
awesome.